Alrighty, today is Saturday, November 8th. I am talking with my friend Chase for the first time in forever, alone. Chase, how are we doing today? How do we feel now that big election happened this week and the government is still shut down? What are our feelings today?
I mean, all things considered, I feel like I'm fine. I'm pretty decent. I mean, it is very annoying that we have a government that can't even function, but you know, that is not a new revelation. So, what's new with that? Um, but yeah, I think all things considered, I'm looking forward to some energy going into like 2026, and I think it's going to sh be interesting to see how things kind of stack out. And seeing the favorability and kind of whether, people will respond and think that Trump changes something in the next coming, months and into the next rest of the term. But, you
Yeah.
know, it's looking like it's going to be pretty downhill from here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that this past week's election was kind of foreshadowing to what the midterms are going to look like next November?
Most likely. I mean, it'll probably be higher turnout in the midterms for those.
Mhm.
Now, Virginia and New Jersey and places like that, there was a pretty high turnout, I think, overall, but like not
For
every
governor's
race was super
races.
high turnout.
Yeah.
But I think midterms would probably be a little bit higher turnout, but I don't think it's going to be a much different electorate. And pairing that with, I mean, the his approvals, but also, I mean, the lived everyday experience of people. Like most people I know, the affordability is getting there, and it's no matter how many times Trump says everything's great, people know it's not, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It didn't work for Biden. It's not going to work for Trump, and people get tired of that eventually. So.
Yeah. Um, so what do you want to dive into first? Zohran Mandani? Do you want to talk about Prop 50? Do you want to talk about the governor's races in Virginia or New Jersey? Where, which one do you want to talk about first? Which one do you want to do a little bit more of a deep dive in?
I mean, we could start with Mamdani. It
Okay.
seems like a good spot.
So Mandami won against Cuomo, and Suwa, even though I don't know why he was even in that race, but that's neither
Don't
here
hate
nor
on Silwa.
there.
Don't hate on Silwa. I'm telling you, that man and cats. Electoral politics of him, no. But like the way he does for the cats, great. Love that man.
All right, so he managed to edge out Cuomo for the second time, but it wasn't as big of a win in terms of margins as we saw as the governor's race in Virginia. What are your feelings? Do you feel like this was like, okay, like now we have an idea on like whether or not this kind of messaging actually works? Because I feel like the Virginia race kind of like showed me that like the win in terms of margins was a lot bigger. And so like it feels like still that middle of the pack candidate is still a little more favorable, or do you think it's because Mondami has something that we just don't realize that like other Republicans are like
Hmm.
kind of thinking like, oh, this is what I don't like about him. Where where is your mind with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, Republicans are almost framing it like it was a win for them because man, Donnie won. Because they assume he's gonna fail. And I think they talk about fleeing New York and going to Florida or all these different states, and like that there's gonna be a mass exodus out of New York and things like that, which is interesting because if it was, anybody else commenting that they were gonna leave a Republican state because a Republican got elected, or whatever, it would be, mocking people. But I think it's a kind of ridiculous reaction to Mamdani. Like, your assumption is that it's going to be a bad thing for Democrats that he won. I don't think so. I mean, I think one, it kind of, signaled to the old guard, time's up.
Yeah.
Like, I think that people like Mamdani have a lot of energy, and, it's the way in which he speaks to New York, I think, and kind of he embodies the culture of New York.
Yeah.
like when I see his ads and I see those things, that's New York to me. That's the New York that you've always kind of known and grew up with, being associated kind of culturally.
Yeah,
And I think that is one massive strength that people don't understand. And I think, you know, what if he's successful? It begins to make you question, what is possible, I think, at large in New York City, but also possibly even the country. Now, is that to say that, Mamdani would win in every single place? No. But I do think that, you know, there's enough energy and I think enough commitment to finishing the job,
yeah,
right? Like a lot of Mamdani's kind of rhetoric and talking about stuff is kind of highlighting keeping me my foot to the or kidding, keeping me to the fire and making sure that I keep going. And you know, I even saw he kind of created this like I forgot what he called it exactly, but basically a fund to help propel the volunteers and things like that to keep working and keep organizing and getting out the vote. Um, but also, I think getting out people's support for the at-large agenda. And
yeah,
I think that's something that people should look at too. Um, because those same volunteers that were working to ensure that people heard about him and all that type stuff, they'll probably be ensured that they heard about the different projects that he's helping build.
yeah,
Or, I think the entire approach of really meeting the people where they are and what their needs are, because the affordability crisis in the entire country is awful. I can only imagine what New York is like.
yeah.
I couldn't do it.
New York, Los
Crazy.
Angeles, DC, like
Yeah.
they're saying like it's only a place that like really rich people can afford now at this
Yeah.
point. It's just gotten to that point where there's so many individuals who are living with their parents because they can't afford
Mm.
rent. The average price for a one bedroom apartment in New York City is a little over 3,500, 3,600, something like that, which I mean is absurd. That's not even including, utilities. That's not even including
Mm.
food. That's not even including like other expenses. So like just thinking about like the average rent being 3,500 for just a one bedroom, I couldn't imagine. So I think that he struck a lot of the right chords, but Cuomo still ended up coming very close, and Cuomo is a deeply
Mhm.
unpopular individual. But I mean, do you see that being kind of the case with the Atlanta race, or not Atlanta, sorry, the Georgia governor's race? Because like the Atlanta former Atlanta mayor who
Mhm.
was kind of deeply unpopular too. Keisha Bottoms is right now the front runner for who is going to be the candidate for the Democrats in 2026 for the governor's race. Do you think that like we have someone that is deeply unpopular but does so well because the Republicans have this, I don't know what they have. They have nothing. I couldn't even tell you anybody that's actually running for governor except for possibly MTG.
Mhm. Um, I mean, I would say that Cuomo is a particularly, I mean, one, I think he was the establishment candidate. Um,
Yeah.
he also has a legacy. I mean, his one, he comments a lot about it, but his father was a fairly popular governor,
Yeah.
and he, in some regards, was popular at some times with
Yeah.
certain things. He wasn't a super unpopular governor,
He only
but
stepped down because of the sexual assault. It wasn't because of any like
yeah, but I
like
think that kind of tainted him because I mean, he's just an untrustworthy person, right?
right.
You sit there and say you're going to drop out. You didn't win the primary, but then you go and you become an independent. Talk about how you dislike Trump and all that, but now he's endorsing you, and so all of a sudden it's great.
Yeah.
It's just, I think people are kind of tired of that, so that's what brought him over. But I do think some of the arguments that are made about Mamdani's particular views on Israel and the way in which, there's been some controversy on how he talks about it. I mean, I think we can dive in a little further and say that nobody comments on people calling him a jihadist or labeling him, as a threat because he's a Muslim. And I think that's exactly what they're doing, right? They're
Yeah.
trying to make him like an enemy and say, oh, he hates Israel and Jews, when many Jews got out the vote for him and like were supportive of him. And he
Yeah.
has talked about, how anti-Semitism is something to combat. So I think I think it's people trying to divide, really.
Hmm.
Um, but I also think that really there was just no way that Mamdani wasn't going to win. He
Yeah.
has the excitement and he has the infrastructure to, I think, deliver it, right?
He has the
Because,
national attention.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And he is skilled. He is on message. He does not stray away from it. And whenever you attack him, it almost seems like to me he gets stronger because his response is usually not what people are used to necessarily from a Democrat. Does he hit back? Sure.
Yeah.
But I think he hits back in a way where he's talking about the politicians and
Hmm.
not the voters.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to start, I think, across the board, across the spectrum. Stop sitting there and acting like just because somebody voted for Trump one time that you can't win their vote or that they're not even interested in, you delivering for them because they are.
Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting that for somebody who a lot of those types of people might not think he cares about them, I do think he does. And I think, you know, we'll see what happens. Things can change. Politicians get in office all the time. But I think there's some excitement there for the future of the Democratic Party at large.
I agree. I agree. Um, Prop 50 on the
Mhm.
ballot won overwhelmingly, uh,
Yeah.
kind of combating what Texas has done. Um, what do you think about that election? Because I feel like, I don't know, after Prop 51, I mean, Gavin Newsom was already the front runner. We've had
Yeah.
numerous guests on here that have already said themselves, from Adam to Deschanel to everybody has said like Gavin Newsom is that guy. Like he's going to be
Mhm.
the front runner for the Democrats. Um, I think like every time we talk about a party leader, his name is the first one to be mentioned. Um, so like in my mind, you know, what I see is like if you even want a chance to be like in the conversation for president for 2028, um, I think that you have to combat what Donald Trump is doing with all
Mhm.
these other states like North Carolina, like possibly, the governor of Colorado or JB Pritzker talking about like possibly redistricting himself, like doing redistricting and gerrymandering himself. Um, I think that you almost have to in order to even be considered as a candidate for president because like nobody wants anybody sitting on their hands doing absolutely nothing. We've seen
Yeah.
that with Jeffries, we've seen that with Schumer. People are very upset. People are begging for the resignation, and it just hasn't happened yet. Um, so in my mind, unless you're fighting back and there's tangible results in fighting back. I mean, some are even saying that the reason why we have a shutdown, the Schumer shutdown right now, quote unquote, is because Schumer doesn't want to be primaried by AOC. And so this was his best way of actually fighting back. So do you feel like this is kind of a springboard in order to for other candidates that are even eyeing the presidential race to be competitive at all is like them going and redistricting themselves?
Mhm. I mean, I think it depends on the candidate and what they can do, right? Like, I mean, I think there's plenty of candidates who they don't really have the option to redistrict or try to combat it.
Hmm.
Um, Now, does that mean that, they're not doing their own version of fighting? No, I don't think so. But I do think it propels Newsom pretty aggressively. And Newsom just has this hunger, this desire for the presidency that, you know, I feel like he would throw almost anyone under the bus.
Yeah.
And I hate myself, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I agree with all of his politics or think that he's the greatest. No, but somebody who is willing to fight and just get out there. And, I don't think his policies are half bad, right? Like,
I agree.
there's some successes that he could have. Now, there's going to be so many people in this primary that I have no clue right now what's going to happen. Because you don't. Like, I think
It's too
I do
early to
think
call.
that there's going to be a generational shift. So it could be, that people are wanting to go with something different.
Hmm.
And, the national narrative about California isn't the best, which is, I think a little funny sometimes. But there's still, you have to combat that. And, there is the challenge, I think, of being perceived as this out of touch California, woke liberal or whatever people would like to say. But, I still think he's at the front runner.
I agree. I
Um,
mean, and I feel like he's obviously willing to sit down and go in front of like other conservatives. I think that like he kind of,
mm,
when he initially started his podcast and had Charlie Kirk as his first guest, I thought that that was kind of a mistake because, like, in hindsight, you are platforming these bigger conservative voices rather than trying to platform some of these bigger Democratic voices. Like,
mm,
why was Brian Tyler Cohen not one of your very first guests, or David Pakman? Like, people that are on your side, that are pushing your message. Like, I felt like that should have been your very first guest. Like,
mm,
that's like having launching a podcast and it being ceremonial is very important. And like, I get that he was probably trying to gather the attention, which he did exactly that with the Charlie Kirk guest appearance,
mm,
but he could have done that later on. I feel like, if you want to do something like that, maybe episode 4 or 5, right? Like, get a couple of leftists in there, get like the attention with some of these people on the left. Like, if so, doing your very first episode is like very ceremonial, but I think he's,
mm,
righted the ship. I think that he's doing a lot of things with left leaning people now. We saw Tim Waltz on there. We saw Harry Sisson on there. Like, we've seen a lot of left leaning
mm,
pundits actually going and making appearances on his podcast, which has been really great. I believe Ezra Klein was on his show. I think he's making strides in the right direction, and especially with what he's doing with Twitter and then the Prop 50, like these two things have been
mm,
huge. Like, he's every step that he's taking, it's like the right move, the right move, the right move. Like, I don't think that anything that he's done in the past like 3 or 4 months has really hurt him in any capacity. Truthfully, he's fighting back. He calls Trump Lady Antoinette or some shit like that. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I think what he's doing is brilliant. I
mm,
really like what he's doing. Prop 50 was great. The fact that he even put it on the ballot for a vote, like saying like, democracy will win on this, and like shows that people are actually genuinely interested in it. I thought was so important. Like, doing the unilateral decision of making those maps without taking it to a vote to the people of the state. I think that hurt Abbott more than it actually helped. Whereas like Gavin Newsom was like, I'm going to put it on the ballot. We're going to make it something that people can vote on. And if they don't like it, then we don't do it. I thought it was
mm.
brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I think putting it to the people was really smart. I mean, it was risky, but it was also smart because now it's like almost like this was the will of the people, which I mean,
It was.
that was what
Literally
people
was.
voted for there.
Yeah.
And I also think that, there's really no other way to combat it. Either, a lot of people are like, well, this is wrong. And it's like, yeah, sure, it's wrong to gerrymander, but the other side's doing it. And right now, I'm not in the mood to play this game for the long haul. I say, gerrymander to the point that there's just blue states and red states, and then people will begin to see that maybe this isn't smart, and maybe we should maybe we should just do something about it and make sure that everybody has a fair shot.
Need an
But I
independent
think
commission.
Republicans don't think that Democrats are going to fight back, and when people start realizing that you're done just like giving in and saying, well, we have to play that by the rules. No, we don't have to play that by the rules, and we're not going to if you're not going to, because in some ways, what what they were wanting to do and what they thought they were going to be able to get away with for a little bit, I think, was just making people deal with what they were doing.
Yeah.
Send the ice, terrorize them, make people angry. But they didn't realize that it made some of their base irritated too. It
Yeah.
made some people who actually supported Trump say, "What is this? Why are we voting for this?" And
Yeah.
even though some people still don't mind some of the things that he's doing at large, more and more comes out where people are starving, but you're building your ballroom. That doesn't, nobody likes that.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
And I think, beyond that, well, it's all the Democrats' fault. Well, if everything's the Democrats' fault and they're the ones who have to fund the government, why on earth would you vote for Republicans?
Yeah.
But, to kind of bring it back to Tuesday, um, I think it was interesting, New Jersey actually more than Virginia. Virginia, I was like, yeah, it's Spanberger's race since almost the beginning. But I never really believed the polls for Nikki Sherrill. I didn't believe that it was going to be that close. Did I think it was going to be fairly close? Sure.
Yeah.
Nothing like it was. But I don't think, I think some of the arguments that they were delivering were stronger. And I mean, I also think that um, you do have some of the national security, work that they've done to kind of, I think, back up some of their more, I wouldn't say, you could call it moderate, but it's just the vibe that they gave off is like, they're not too crazy. They're going to deliver what I need them to deliver to. And I mean, you see a lot of the trends with like some of the voters, like even young men, Latino voters, they came back to the Dems for that. Like
They
they
had
were
to.
aggressive.
They literally had to. I
Yeah.
the way that ICE has just been indiscriminately going and grabbing people off of the streets, like there's
Mm.
no way anybody that's Hispanic would feel comfortable, even if you were like a diehard, ardent Trump supporter, seeing
Yeah.
what ICE has been doing, just, going after people that are, that
Mhm.
look even remotely Hispanic has been absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Um, and I think there's also, those were the main ones of the night, but I really, really was looking at, which it's my own personal bias to a degree too, but some of these smaller races, I was actually very interested in the some of the results that they had too. Um, and you can talk about even some like school board races where there were some dim wins, but
Yeah,
in a little bit bigger scale, like I think the PSC race in Georgia was kind of insane.
that was an
And people
amazing.
aren't like, you want to talk about margins. The Dems won by 25%.
Yeah.
25% in Georgia when last year Trump had won it.
Yeah.
But I will say that having, dealing with energy costs in Georgia, people didn't really care if it was like Democrat or Republican as much. Like, I was on a door down here and a Republican answered the door.
Hmm.
And he was like, I'm still voting Democrat for the PSC. Basically, like, telling me that he was tired of the utility bills, right? Like he didn't have to say it. We both understood what he was saying.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize that one, people are not as ideologically bound because if you tell me that I can save money because I'm gonna elect you, that's a universal argument.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like good. That sounds good to me. Can you make it how much cheaper can you make it?
Right.
But being on these doors, there is a shift in Georgia because I think there's a lot of investment.
Hmm.
Asaf is a beast, fundraising beast. I was seeing there was a poll the other day, and who knows how accurate it is, but saying that like 20% of Georgia Republicans were supportive of Asaf.
Yeah.
And no, that's a crazy number. But also I think the ground game with like local organizations and organizing and getting out the vote and you know maximizing your turnout in Metro Atlanta, not losing it by as much in like certain areas.
Hmm.
You could really start to see the path of Georgia going to from purple to like a more aggressively blue state, I think. And I could be wrong on that, but it does seem to be like a lot of the numbers that they're pulling. And I think when you have some success and you deliver things that people actually think is a good job, I think people resonate with that, and I think Ossoff and Warnock have really delivered for the state. Um, so I say that there's some interesting with that, and the governor's race, and all those other races for statewide office in Georgia, they're looking real good for Democrats now.
I
Like
agree.
it's going to be a great fundraising argument.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you to your point about like it being more aggressively blue, I think that the Trump administration has like really burned a lot of bridges here, or there. Sorry, I'm acting like I'm in Georgia right now. And like he was beefing with Kemp before,
Mhm.
the election, and then all of a sudden he tried to make things right, and then like
Yeah.
he had issues with Kemp after the 2020 election because he was going to certify the votes, and then it was like that whole situation. Um, and so like I think that to your point, which is why Kemp didn't want to go and face off against John Ossoff, is because I think that he kind of sees where the tide is rolling. Like, regardless of what you
Mhm.
think about Kemp, Kemp isn't a stupid person. I think that he
No.
sees where the tide is rolling, and he's like, okay, I don't think that I've got a shot here. Let me see if I can do something else. So
Mhm.
he's trying to figure out like what his next move, which might be a presidential run, which I mean I could see being pretty smart, right? Like he was
Yeah.
a relatively popular governor here, and him being on the ticket at the very least as a VP would be huge, especially for Georgia. Um, you know, I also think in part, man, I think that if we win the governor's office and then we have like someone like Ossoff go and run as the VP, for, whoever wins the nomination, Georgia is 100% turning blue there. But on top of that, if we win the governor's mansion, then we get to choose who the senator is, the sitting
Mhm.
senator is. And so
Yeah.
like that right there in itself could be like very beneficial of like we wouldn't have to lose a Senate seat since
Mhm.
Ossoff wouldn't be in a race that he would actually have to run for, in terms of like his 2020 uh for his Senate seat because he's already running next year in 2026. So his
Mhm.
seat would be safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, who knows how everything's going to shake out, and he might even himself run for office. So, who knows with that. But I think even like um digging in a little bit further, just to kind of briefly talk about, I think Mississippi was interesting in itself too, because they broke a supermajority of Republicans in
First time in
Mississippi.
30 years or 20 years.
Yeah. Now, does that mean Mississippi's on its path to being blue?
Yeah.
You got a couple of steps there, but people people don't people don't understand states.
Yeah.
They think that Mississippi or Alabama or whatever this state is just so conservative. They've never elected Democrat.
Yeah.
They have, and they will.
Yeah.
They're going to at times, and that's the thing that people don't realize is like statewide, if candidates define themselves in terms that is acceptable to people in that state, that's how you win. You don't need, if you're running locally, you don't need to win everywhere. You just need to
Exactly.
win where you need to win. And
Right.
I think, looking at Mississippi, there's like gains to be made and even an argument to be made for states that don't even look blue to at least get out there.
Yeah.
Get some organizing and a ground game there, and you'll never know what you can flip and stay on message.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. Affordability and the cost of living and economics, that's one of the biggest focus that I think people should kind of take away.
Yeah.
And whoever actually resolves those issues and is able to argue them and, make sure people trust it, I think that's who really wins.
Yeah. And speaking of Mississippi, Pennsylvania also had a Supreme Court race that they ended up keeping
Mhm.
the three Supreme Courts, which could help with any kind of gerrymandering or what's it called? Any yeah, redistricting efforts that
Mhm.
Republicans try to put forward in the next election cycle. So like this, I mean, like I said, I think Dems had a sweeping victory across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, they outperformed literally everywhere, um, which was really good to see. And I think that was promising for 2026. All right. So government is still shut down. We're on day like what, 200 now, 250, something like
I think
that.
it's like 37. but
Yeah.
you just are seeing the future probably, unfortunately.
No,
Um,
seriously.
I do think that I can't see it lasting past the end of the year. I mean, at that point, the amount of chaos that it's going to cause, it. I mean, I don't, know what can happen next. What really with that? Like, I think, does it mean that everything's going to collapse? No, but I think people reducing, like, right as we're going into the holiday season, creating travel chaos, right?
Well, not
Um,
only travel chaos, but like a lot of these people are like working class people. A lot of these people are, trying to get
yeah,
SNAP benefits. Like it's not just the chaos of like flights being delayed or packages not being delivered. It's like people are
yeah,
there are literally over 1 million people that are either furloughed or were laid off because
mhm.
because of this government shutdown.
Yeah, and I mean, also people that are working that aren't getting paychecks, and
Exactly.
I personally have no idea how you can, like, how does a person, do they just have enough savings? Is there
Yeah,
some sort of compensation? Like, how do you survive at that point?
exactly. Like
Like,
you do have to dive into your savings at that point. Like
assuming you have enough to live off of, like, I mean,
exactly.
the cost of living is already, awful as it is. So, that's unlikely in itself. So, it depends on these people. Maybe that they have, a month or two, but once those funds start running out too, it's not going to be too different than like looking at the situations with Snap, right? Like people are talking about, like one, focusing on the people who are suffering and won't be able to get food for their families, right?
Yeah.
But then also seeing the grocery stores who won't get the funds from SNAP that make up probably a decent percentage of a lot of stores,
Yeah.
income with that. So they can't even, make their ends meet with the businesses. So I mean, it's just, it keeps rolling down, and you know, perhaps there's some changes with tariffs and things like that, but without seeing what the Supreme Court rules on that, there's still probably going to be some sort of tariffs, right?
Yeah.
And I think people haven't started really fully feeling the tariffs yet. Like
They
once people
won't until
like
next year.
we're starting to kind of, I think, see the first bit of like this is actual tariff pain, but the longer it goes, the more you're going to start to feel it.
You've seen some of not the chair, sorry, I misspoke there. Some of the board of Fed on the Federal Reserve even speak about how they've gone into the community, and a lot of these companies right now are agreeing to eat the costs because they fear retaliation
Mm,
from Donald Trump. And so, like, they're trying to either find some sort of reprieve by trying to make a deal. We've just seen Eli Lilly and Novo Nordic, whatever it's called, that are brand new deals that were made by the Trump administration yesterday in terms of being able to bypass any tariffs because now they're going to be lowering their prescription drug costs
mm,
moving forward, and so now they're not going to be tariffed. So like that right there was another sense of reprieve. We've already seen Nvidia and AMD also ask for the pay to play, where they're giving like 10% of any chip sales to Donald Trump from China or to China.
mm,
So, I mean, like I said, we're already seeing like a lot of these companies trying to find maneuver their way around the tariffs as much as possible. But these smaller players, they that don't have the capital to bribe Trump, it's going to be a lot different. And like I said, he right now, a lot of people are, eating the costs, but they're going to have to start putting it on
mm,
people next year, or start seeing their margins get hit, and hence why we're seeing as many layoffs as we've seen, right? Like as of the beginning of October, there was 209,000
mm,
jobs that were created, the lowest since 2009, the Great Recession. Um, so I, I don't know. I think that like you're right. Like these tariffs haven't even really even been we haven't even felt the huge impact
mm,
yet. I think that we don't start seeing that until like Q1 of next year, which is scary. And then on top of that, all of this government shutdown, people are reducing spending right now, and
mm,
it's about to be the holidays. Like there's just a lot going on that I think there's going to be a lot of hiccups for the next like 3 or 4 months before any kind of certainty
mm,
starts, because like once the government starts to get going again, there's still going to be some bumpy roads because I mean, it's not just going to recover right away. Like, right, we've been closed for over a month now. On top of that, like you said, tariffs, like tariff impact is going to start being felt starting sometime next year.
Mm,
People are going to start pushing the cost on the consumer. Um, but also, who knows? Maybe after the Supreme Court, which this is very interesting seeing the ruling, which I mean, well, not interesting. It makes sense.
yeah.
Because the order that Donald Trump used was an emergency order in order to put blanket tariffs on countries, including Australia and the UK, that we have surpluses with. Like, you can't use an emergency tariff order or an emergency economic order to implement tariffs on countries that we actually have a surplus with. It just doesn't make any sense. So these tariffs being struck down is just, I mean, at this point, almost seems like common sense. I feel like, there
Mm,
are a lot of Republicans that are like, oh, well, maybe, because Trump, since they're like conservative majority right now, maybe he squeaks it by. I'm just like, no, they have to look at the
yeah.
fundamentals. And then that leaves a lot of questions if it does get overturned, which it's not up
Mm,
to the Supreme Court on like how refunds go. Because like if these were illegal taxes, then you have to start refunding the government. And they already passed the the big ugly bill. So I mean, you're looking at a depletion of funding there, and then
mm,
losing the tariff money on top of that. Like the the economy is just going to absolutely like suffer if they don't figure out another way around this
mm.
tariff thing.
Well, I mean, I think they'd have to readjust. And I mean, I also think that businesses are only going to be scared for so long. After a certain point, if they see it's politically toxic for you, they don't care anymore.
Yeah,
If you're not this, and the thing is, I think slowly but surely, people are like, "Oh, Trump's going to do this, Trump's going to do that," and he did some of those things, but then he also sits there and it's like, you're not even the cards you're playing aren't even that strong.
yeah,
You don't have that many moves to be made, and I think if things go a certain way, he's going to have to capitulate. He's going to have to almost reorient how the entire, economic argument that they've kind of underpinned and are going after. And I mean, I would say that that probably would lead to uh, some sort of aggressive deals. I think it would be just like a deal blitz at that point to be like, okay, actually, you remember how we were negotiating so hard and we were upset about everything? We're good. That's cool. And now, we'll see what Trump does with that, but I could see him, you know, at a certain point, Trump
yeah,
would rather probably get his some popularity back than just keep going on the path he's going. Now, maybe he's just so far gone that he doesn't see it, but I do think some of his tone and just kind of how he kind of sees the polling coming in and then, seeing what results in 2026, that'll really like if and what I think that's going to lead to is not only are corporations going to start pushing back harder, you're already starting to see a little MAGA civil war breaking out where people
Nick
all across the board
Fuentes
are going to
versus
start,
Ben
and
Shapiro.
well, I think that's true. I mean, and there's a lot of conversations to be had with that, but that's going to like those kind of whole arguments of like the Nazi wing of our party and trying to deal with what that means. Um, but I also think that like once some of his vision wears off and he's not this tyrant anymore, Republican ambitions will step in, and the Josh Hawleys and any 2028 contenders who have their own arguments and don't have to rely on Trump, they start becoming more aggressive. And I do think 2026 kind of determines what the Republican terrain looks like. Now, I mean, I could see Vance is definitely going to run, but it's really who challenges him and who, whether, he's even popular anymore to be able to kind of, argue that like what we did was great, or if he's going to have to try to, do the opposite of Kamala and be like, yeah, Trump is awful, all this stuff sucks, instead of, like everything's great, right?
Yeah,
You got to just be honest, and I think people are going to realize that one way or the other.
yeah,
Um, so it's
yeah.
interesting to see how this all going to shake out.
So is woke back?
It's always been back. You know
Put the
they were just
pronoun
woke in a
back in
different
the email
way.
signature.
They were conservative woke, right? It's like you had to just be awoken to their ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like now
Yeah.
the perfect example, you know, we talk about all these people, but it's like they do the same exact things, right? The cancel culture aspects where it's like you said thing that I didn't like, so now you're canceled. You know, they
Yeah.
do the same thing. It's just everybody in the country just got their own version of woke. It was like this is the list of people to hate. This is the list of people to like comment in their inbox.
It
Um,
kills me because like they don't even call it cancel culture. They call it go woke, go broke. And I'm just like, is that not the exact same thing as fucking cancel culture? Like, I don't know. Ugh.
and did the wokes go broke? They still like a lot of those things that were gonna go broke seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't think so. I feel like a lot of these woke
Yeah.
people are still doing pretty well. Um, all right. I mean, other than that, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? I feel like we kind of covered everything. We have a
Mm.
possibly another interview coming up next week. If not, we'll
Yeah.
just do our normal one-on-one. And we have a couple of special guests coming up soon. So
Mm.
look forward to that. Uh, because Chase said that he would hold a gun to my head if I didn't do this.
Okay. I swear.
Please make sure to like and subscribe on this channel. It helps with the views, and Chase will not kill me if you do that. So
I
hopefully.
don't. I won't kill him either way. I swear.
Well, I appreciate it, Chase, and I will talk to you later.
Yep. Stay alive. Just making sure that it's gonna be a bad scene if you wind up dead.
I'm gonna air this and make sure that like everyone sees it, and I'll be dead like come Sunday.
You have a great.
I'm just kidding. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye.